Hey there, friends. In today's episode, we're talking all things finances, habits, debt, even teaching our kids about money. We'll dive into budgeting tips, the magic of compound interest, and how to stay financially fit. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. I'm Natalie Tysdal, a journalist who decided enough is enough. I left a career that looked glamorous to do what I was scared of doing, going out on my own. I'm a married working mom of 3. On this podcast, we're going to talk about issues that really matter. Why am I not sleeping? What's up with that diet everyone's talking about? Are my kids falling behind? How do I leave that job and start over? Welcome to the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back, everyone. I have a great episode lined up for you today. I'm joined by Brad Nelson, known as the Debt-Free Dad. Brad is dedicated to helping people achieve financial freedom through better habits, choices, and a transformed financial mindset. In today's conversation, Brad and I are going to dive deep into human traits that can significantly improve your finances. Yes, really, believe me. We're going to tackle common misconceptions about budgeting, and Brad offers some really insightful perspectives on healthy debt, the pros and cons of using credit cards for rewards. Yep, that's one I've been arguing, and the incredible power of compound interest. We're also going to touch on the unique financial challenges faced by men versus women, and Brad has some actionable tips you can take with you today and practical advice to help you gain control over your finances and reduce stress. So hit subscribe wherever you are listening to the podcast. I have some incredible guests coming up that you won't want to miss. And be sure you hop online to join me on my website, which is natalietysdal.com. Let's get started today with the Debt-Free Dad, Brad Nelson. Brad, so fun to talk to you about a topic that I have not addressed here on this podcast, but I know it applies to a lot of women in particular.
Yeah, absolutely, Natalie. So glad to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation, and it's oftentimes a tough conversation, and that's what we do here at Debt-Free Dad, is to hopefully break down this conversation, make it a little bit easier, and it's just to get through all these financial challenges that many of us face.
So men and women, families, young and old, we all have financial issues. But for women specifically, you told me earlier that it does apply more to women. Why is that? Do we stress more about it?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, and as I mentioned, we started Debt-Free Dad almost a decade ago, and my goal was to just help people more on a one-on-one level, and it eventually turned into like this worldwide thing. Like now we're all over the place, which is pretty cool. But, we originally just started pushing out this messaging of less financial stress, more financial peace in your life, less worry, less anxiety, just having a sense of, security, being able to sleep at night. When you go to work, you're focused on work. You're not so, focused on stressing about when your paycheck comes and when those bills are due. And as we've been, promoting and producing this content and even, opening up our membership, Roots of Personal Finance, over the years, so much of that content has now been consumed by women. And they come and they say things like, I want more peace. I want less stress in my life. How do I get my partner on board with this? Because, they're dragging their feet to the table of wanting to make some financial changes. And what we tend to find is that a lot of them like to listen to our podcast. They like to, go through our content, and it's more has become like that support and that accountability, because they may not be necessarily getting that inside of their relationship, because money and personal finance is one of the leading causes of divorce. Money fights and money arguments it's always in the top 3 reasons of divorce. So it's a very complicated and tough topic inside of a relationship. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that you're a marriage counselor too.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, only to a certain point, because I think, when it comes to relationships, there can be financial challenges that are involved, but sometimes it can be a deeper, relationship and communication issue. And there's been plenty of times where I've had to refer couples to like, hey, before we even get to this money thing, like I feel like there's some other things that you guys need to really kind of work through. That's like, coming up to the surface of now the money, and you're still kind of butting heads. So, there are some times where it's like, okay, you do have to seek out a licensed marriage counselor to help you through some of those things. But yeah, I think for most of our audience, it is the interest usually comes from women. And and that was always puzzling to me, because if you hear about money, it's always been this general theme. Well, in a relationship between a husband and a wife, it's the husband always makes all the decisions and controls all the money. Not anymore. That's just not the way it works anymore. So yeah, that's really where a lot of our audience comes from.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about getting debt free. I know you have a million things you could give us, but I want to try to boil it down. We're going through our own thing right now with a car that broke down, and daughter's got to have a car in college and all of that. So we feel it. It's real life stuff. Where do you start when you're pressured by this and you've got those issues?
Yeah, it's I think the best place you can start is really genuinely sitting down, and this is a big ask when you're getting started, but it is sitting down and figuring out what kind of life it is that you want to live. What do you truly want in your life? Because if you don't answer that question, you're going to be told by society, by marketing, by advertising, what life you're supposed to be living. And for most people, that life has become unaffordable. You know, it's the brand new house with the 2 nice cars and going on those, vacations every year, having all the nice clothes, participating in all the sports with your kids, and we just, as families, we just cannot afford to be living that way anymore. So I think it's important as families is to sit down and build more of a backbone for your own life and saying, okay, what is it that I want and that we care about? And then we have to get really good at ignoring what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where a lot of people that we're consuming, we're buying, we're doing things, but a lot of it has become because of influence of other people and what we've been seeing other people do.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. And I call it developing your why power of why you want to get out of debt. You decide the life that you want to live. Likely, you're from a financial standpoint, you're not able to get or have the life that you want right away, but that becomes the reason on why you want to get out of debt. Because getting out of debt isn't easy. It's hard work. You have to make sacrifices, say no, and if you don't have what we like to call is this why power, this passion of wanting to change or wanting to do the activities to change it, it's really tough to win. So I think when it comes down to the foundational level, you really got to develop what that vision is of what you want your life to look like.
Yeah.
And from there, then it gets a little bit easier, because now we can start develop some simple actionable items on a regular basis that'll help you eventually get there. And I think one of the best things that you can do as someone who's new, who wants to really kind of maybe get a better understanding of their finances, or you want to have kind of that first step to look at, is really getting an idea of where your spending is going right now. We shared a statistic on our podcast recently. Upwards of 50% of the entire millennial generation has no idea what's going on in their bank account. No idea.
Really?
Half of an entire generation, they're not paying attention. We also shared another funny statistic on that same episode that says people will prioritize taking care of their houseplants over actually sitting down and working on their finances.
Wow. Do you think technology has something to do with that, though? Because, we used to reconcile our bank accounts. We used to fill, and now it's almost like kids now, and many adults too, they don't clean up their email box. It just all kind of sits there. I used to at least put it in files and make sure it was empty. And now it's like, it's all just there. Why do you delete that? Like my kids will go, why do you delete all your texts, Mom? Just leave them. I'm like, it drives me crazy to have a million texts on my phone. But you see where I'm going. Does the technology make that worse?
I think it definitely plays a part, but I think the other reason why we tend to ignore it is because, again, you're looking at 6, and in some cases, some statistics share that 7 out of 10 households are living paycheck to paycheck. So you're going into a topic, you're going into a situation that isn't good.
Yeah.
And we don't want to focus on it too much because it is too stressful. Right now, the number one stress in the United States is money and personal finance. Obviously, with inflation and high expenses, that isn't helping that. People are saying 47% of people admit that money is the number one reason of a decline in mental health in their life.
Wow.
And so, I think those are some of the reasons. It's the feelings that we get when we actually sit down and look at our finances and look at the challenges that we're facing, look at how much debt we have, how little savings. It's tough to look at. It's scary. I've been there. I used to live paycheck to paycheck too. But I think when you're first getting started, I think really getting a pulse about where your spending is going, what your true financial situation looks like, is so important. Natalie, I've worked with so many people over the years, and even in today's economic times, where people will say, Brad, I don't have the money to save. I don't have the money to get out of debt. I don't have the money to make progress. I'm broke. I'm barely just getting by. But then we have them do this little activity. Go back and print out the last 3 to 6 months. If you want to be an overachiever, go do 12 months of expenses. Print out bank statements, print out your credit card statements, print out anything you're spending money on, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. You can do this electronically. I don't care, but print all this stuff out, do it digitally, but start categorizing where all of your money is going. And more times than not, I have people come to me. Actually, I haven't had one person come back to me and ever say, and actually do this, and come back to me and say, I knew exactly where every dollar was going. In fact, it's usually it's always the opposite of people coming back to me. I am blown away about what I found, what we were spending on certain things that I just wasn't paying attention to. You know, we were talking about subscription products for our businesses right before we hit record on this. But, you know, subscriptions, going out to eat, number one area that people overspend in. Natalie, I've had people who say that they're broke spending over $1,000 a month going out to eat, and they didn't even have a thought that would have been the amount. So this stuff is happening all the time. And again, everyone's situation is going to be different, but I guarantee you by going through this, you're going to get a good understanding of what's out there, what you need to look at for overspending, but what you also need to look at. What do I need to get rid of that I'm not using? Yeah. Or number 3, what are some things that I'm using that I haven't shopped around? Maybe you're just not getting the best price anymore. So by going through and giving your finances a true audit, it allows you to have a good reset and you have a place to start from.
It's so healthy, just like your diet. I think of it that way. Like you can ignore and not look at calories. And eventually that's going to start burning you when you get older and your metabolism isn't working as well, you know?
Yeah, right.
And same with spending. So do you have, I know this is what you do. So your resources and other resources out there to help people figure this out. Technology is so great. I know there are apps that like look at all the subscriptions you have as an example, but what resources do you give people to start getting a handle on all of this?
I am so old fashioned because I love technology. I think the apps that are out there are great. I think, even looking at spreadsheets, I think sometimes there's some pretty cool spreadsheets out there that can help you. But me personally, for people who are just getting started, I'm old fashioned. And I know the younger people who might be listening to this might be like, that's crazy. I'll never do that. But pen and paper is still what I recommend when you get started. There is something about the process of going through all of your stuff, taking a pencil or a pen, writing it down on paper, and getting it all put together. There's more of a commitment to that than say putting into app. Apps are really nice, but they're also really nice to close and never look at again.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you
tend to app made me do it.
Right. Exactly. Now, there are cool tools like all this fintech that's out there that, like investing and budgeting and, like you said, finding subscriptions and things. Are there some cool and unique tools out there that can help you navigate some of this? Absolutely. But I think it all starts with creating much better financial habits in your own life, and then finding the apps that will fit within those habits that you've created. Because it's easy to just figure out, this app's going to help me do everything. It's not the app that's going to do it. It's your behavior. It's your habits. It's your choices. It's that daily commitment that I'm going to be consistent and disciplined, and I'm going to hold myself accountable. Those are the human traits that we really need to have to improve our finances. These tools can help, but you need to focus on those. And that's really primarily here at Debt Free Dad, what we help people improve are the habits, the choices, the behaviors, changing their financial mindset, starting to help them understand how debt and all of these things are being marketed to you in a way that really keeps you in debt and just keeps you stressed the rest of your life. We're teaching people to think outside the box and say, hey, you can do this stuff different as a normal, typical family. And we have people who are doing it every single day. And it's astounding. Even in today's economic times, we see normal everyday people making just tremendous headway in just 90 days, 6 months, the thousands of dollars they're saving and paying off. It's incredible. But it all starts with thinking differently based on where everybody is today.
Yeah. Give me an example. So you sit down, you take 3 months, 6 months, a year, as you said, and you outline what? And give me an example of how someone has changed after doing all of that.
Yeah. So the first thing is, obviously, I think a budget is so important to your overall financial health. Unfortunately, budgeting gets a bad rap. Budgeting means you're cheap. It means you're broke. It means you're a penny pincher. It means you don't like to spend money. That's what most people think the budget is. And the reality is, if you look up budget in the dictionary, none of those words are associated to the definition of that word. It's more or less just a calculation of your income and your expenses, no matter what your income is and no matter what your expenses are. So once you go through your expenses and you understand where your money's going, you've decided what you're going to cut out, what you're going to shop around, what you're going to keep. It becomes a lot easier to actually put together a monthly budget that begins to make sense based on the income that you have. And then the key to budgeting isn't writing the budget. It is then following it. That's where most people need the practice. And budgeting over time, it takes time. It's not something that, and I think people, when they start to say, like, I'm going to work on my finances, just like you mentioned, Natalie, it's like diets. We tend to put this amazing amount of pressure of perfectionism on ourselves. Like, we have to get this absolutely perfect or we fail. And that's just not the case. People ask me all the time, Brad, how did you get out of debt? Well, the reality is I failed my way there. I really did. I failed over and over again. I overspent in areas. I changed my ways, and I would overspend in other areas. You have these habits that keep coming up because it's such a human thing. But you just have to keep at it. And that's the secret to it, is developing good financial habits, which takes time, and having good budgeting habits, which takes time. If you can do those two things, the rest of it starts to get a lot easier. Things like saving money and creating a habit of money, or creating a habit of saving. If you have a budget and you're now starting to really have a pulse of what your expenses are, and not every case, but in most cases, within the first few months, you're going to start to see, like, I actually do have money I can start saving. 63%, the last statistic I heard, 63% of Americans can't handle a $500 emergency expense without going into debt right now.
Wow.
So that, to me, is a huge goal. Like, if you're not someone who can handle, say, a $500 or $1,000 emergency expense, to me, like, your first goal is, we need to get some sort of savings together, because if you don't get a savings together, you're going to constantly be relying on those credit cards, that home equity line of credit, or whatever it is the financial industry has sold you that you need for those emergencies, and you'll never get yourself out of this vicious cycle of always using debt. So once you have those habits and that budget, we can begin to then build upon that foundation, and that's when the long-term results come, is if you're willing to be disciplined and consistent with those few things.
Yeah. I mean, that's anything in life, right?
Yeah,
especially
it is.
Here. It's one of those things, like it's anything, any success that you have is discipline. But yet for some reason, as you mentioned, a lot of us say, I'm good, I'll just spend this, without really being disciplined about it. Let me ask you this. What is healthy debt? Is there healthy debt?
Well, this is an interesting question. On the surface level, if you look at it without putting any human side to it, obviously looking at mortgage would be a healthy debt, because you're investing in a home, which, as we all know right now, is appreciating very, very quickly, right?
If you can afford the interest rates, though.
If you can afford the interest rates, if you can afford the mortgage, I mean, you could look at that as like a good debt. But as someone who has not been able to pay a mortgage, which I had a home foreclosed on me when I went through this whole process very early on, when you can no longer pay a mortgage, it's no longer a good debt. It's not fun at all. So I think it's hard for me to say, like, going into debt to build a business is considered a good debt. Only if you can pay it and you have a good business plan.
Okay.
Buying a home, it could be a good debt. Only if you have the means to pay that mortgage and do the upkeep on the home and have a good budget and keep those things good debts. Because as soon as you can't, none of it's good anymore. So I think anytime you go into debt, there's going to be risk. I think the thing is right now, though, is that we see a lot of people, a lot of typical households going into debt for a lot of depreciating assets. Things like cars. And I mean, the average car payment right now is $700. I think last time, it was USA Today that reported it's like $740 a month is the average new car payment now. And it's not uncommon for me to see two of those in a household. So I think when it comes to normal consumers and normal families, what we're seeing is a lot of credit card debt. We're seeing
is there ever healthy credit card debt?
In my opinion, no. It's like if you have good financial habits, what's the use or what's the need for credit cards? And people will say, well, Brad, I use credit cards to leverage points and rewards and I pay it off every month. Well, and that's fine. I have no argument there whatsoever. But the one thing I would say is that if you're one of those individuals who does that, just go look at the credit card companies and how they advertise their cards to merchants to take their cards. They admit that the average transaction is much more than someone paying cash. Of course they want everyone to take credit cards. So even if you're using your credit card to leverage points and rewards and you're paying it off every month, statistically, it's been proven by the credit card companies, you are spending more by using a credit card versus, say, using cash.
So then how in typical, okay, so I'm totally guilty here then, because the grocery store, airlines, you name it, we use our credit cards. We pay them off, but we use our credit cards to get the points. But if I'm not using a credit card, how am I paying for those things?
Well, you could still use a debit card for all of those things. I do not have
but they're still
a
going to
personal...
charge the same amount. Like if I go to my grocery store, I'm still paying the same amount if I'm paying with a credit card or a debit card.
Correct. Now, when it comes to certain transactions, like you mentioned, booking airlines, or like you go to a cashless event, like a lot of sporting events now, concerts are cashless. It's almost impossible to not have some sort of an electronic payment method.
Right.
But what I would encourage you to do is look for the areas where you don't have to do that. Like, for instance, you mentioned grocery shopping. Shopify came out with some statistics about grocery shopping. Upwards of 50% of all grocery purchases are made on impulse. Mm-hmm. So if you're using those credit cards, it's much easier to say, well, it's only a few dollars. I'm just going to throw it in my cart. Plus, I'm earning points and rewards on that. Whereas opposed to if you have cash and you have to stick to a budget because you want to meet your savings goals, you want to meet your debt payoff goals, cash is accountable because once it runs out, it's gone. Mm-hmm. Whereas opposed to a credit card or even a debit card in some cases, it's easy to throw a little bit of extra stuff into the cart because you are using and swiping the card.
Yeah.
And they've even done studies on this, Natalie. People through MRI machines during the purchasing process of people using credit cards versus people using cash. And the actual pain sensors in your brain are much more visible when you use cash and hardly visible at all when you use credit cards. Mm-hmm. So this is a real psychological thing that is happening. But I also am a realist, and I get that we are getting closer and closer and closer to obviously having much more electronic payments. But I think the point of why I'm bringing this up is you have to be very aware because they make it so easy to overspend nowadays and to spend money and even to go into debt for things that you didn't even plan on spending money on. Yeah. So we just have to be careful. They make all of these tools and all these things more convenient. It looks cool. It's the way to go. Yeah. But you also have to understand, how is that affecting your overall personal finance life?
Yeah. And I worry about that. I'm sure you've done a lot of episodes on this for our kids because it's funny money. You know,
it is.
It's I've got Apple Pay on my phone and my mom pays for it. Like when my son first got Apple Pay, he's 14, and we had to have a backup plan, right? That you're out somewhere and you have no money and you need to buy lunch. And now that you're almost 15, and we moved to a place where the first week it was, well, I went here for breakfast and then I went and I got ice cream. And then I'm like, wait a minute, how'd you pay for this? Well, I had Apple Pay. I went, oh, it's not just funny money. It's not just, okay. So now we got to go back and we got to look at where that was paid for. But I think, like you're saying, credit cards in general, Apple Pay, especially just, I'm just going to hold my phone over it, beep, beep, done. Like there's not even a pulling out of a card anymore to feel that purchase.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, when we're teaching this to the younger generation, to our kids, how do you suggest we, as parents, we set it up so that they have a budget, they feel it, they understand it, and we're leading them into good habits?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with the parents themselves practicing good financial habits. I think, there is this calling right now, and I know, here across the United States, more school districts are getting involved, but having more personal finance classes and, all of those things involved in school. And I think that's a great start. However, it really does start at home too. And I think what we do at home needs to support what's happening in the schools. And sadly, when you have 7 out of 10 households living paycheck to paycheck, a lot of the stuff isn't being taught. Yeah. So I think what it comes down to, number one, is as parents, we need to learn how to do this stuff and really model good financial habits, good financial mindset, talking on a positive note about money. Whereas opposed to some people are all used to hearing, well, we're broke, we can't afford that. Those aren't really good financial mindsets that we're instilling on our kids. Or hearing bill collectors and all those people call. And again, I'm not shaming anybody for that. I used to live that life too. Yep. I've been behind in bills, lived a very sad financial life. But the reality is I think that's where it first starts. Secondly, like you just said, Natalie, is finding those teachable moments in our kids' lives. It's not always just to sit down, I'm going to teach you a lesson right now, because those lessons are around us all the time.
Yeah.
And my son is 14, going to be 15 this year too. And that's one of the things that I do with him. He's got a lawn cutting business that he started this year on his own. He's getting paid cash. He's taken it upon himself, and now it's been a great teaching opportunity for me is to work with him on some of this stuff. And again, I'm not like pounding on him about it, but I am starting to kind of talk to him about some of these things. Like, you can't spend all the money that you make, Noah.
Yeah.
You have to decide how much you're going to keep for later, how much you're going to spend, and how much you're actually going to save and invest. So let's think about that. Like, if he loves shoes, like, kid's nuts about these shoes, especially these shoes. They're really expensive.
Yeah.
And, he came to me the other day and he's like, I want to buy these shoes. I'm like, well, how much are they? He's like, they're like $275. I'm like, well, how much money do you have? I have like $280. I'm like, okay, so you have enough money to buy them. However, that leaves you with $5. And it's right now, I shouldn't say the other day, it's right in the beginning of summer. And I told him, I was like, well, what if a friend invites you to go somewhere and do something? Or what if you need money to do an activity that you just don't know about right now? You're going to spend all your money on these shoes because you think this is everything that you need right now. But I can guarantee you in a few weeks, something's going to come up and you're going to be like, I wish I had bought those shoes. Mm-hmm. So you need to understand that. Like, you can't spend all of your money on one thing or multiple things and just have nothing left. You have to save some for the unexpected things that are going to come up, whether it be emergencies or even fun things that you want to do in your life.
Yeah.
So it's just teaching them some of those basic budgeting skills very early on.
Yeah.
Third, I would say about the power of saving early when it comes to things like compound interest. When your kids start working, you can open up a kids Roth IRA for them. They can already start investing at a young age. And I think, parents, look this up. If you don't know what compound interest is, go out there, look up what compound interest is. But the secret of compound interest is time. The earlier you get started, the better off it's going to be.
Yeah.
And the sad reality, we were just talking about this on our podcast, is that, when you're young, we tell ourselves we have plenty of time to save. But the reality is when you're young, that's when you should be saving and creating that habit, because it's amazing what those early years can do for you long term when you start looking at, the age of 50 and 60 and those retirement years. So that's one of the things that I've done with my kids is, instead of, say, buying more stuff and more things, I have earmarked money in our budget to start investing for them early. And I've got them involved in the process. I show them some of the balances and say, hey, look, this is what Dad's been doing for you for all these years. When you get to the point where you're making money, you're going to take this over and you're going to continue doing this.
Yeah.
And look at how much it's grown, right? We're going to keep doing this, and you're going to see the power of saving early and saving often. And I think this is one of the things, in society and in schools that we've got to be teaching people, is that it's all in the saving. It's what you keep. It's not what you spend. It's what you keep and hold on to and invest in, whether that be, and what you can do for your kids with that, is starting their own business or, making a down payment on their first home and doing all those things. Or maybe just keep it in there for retirement savings for later. There's a lot of power in just doing some of those small things. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. It could be $5 to $10 a month that you could start them on. But just to show them the power of how interest works and how it works for them if they're using it the right way, whereas opposed to a lot of people are getting killed by interest because they're getting penalized because it's debt.
Yeah. And it is just health. It's financial health, like you mentioned, and discipline. It's hard, but then once you start doing it, it's like, well, maybe it's not that hard. And I know that's what you teach, and that's why I wanted to have you on. Like, it makes us feel better overall. And when it comes to our physical health, not financial health, it's better when we have these things in order.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so there's so much more. Tell us about your podcast, all the programs you have, and where people can continue to learn from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully today's conversation encouraged you to be like, you know what, I need to learn more about this. You can head over to the Debt Free Dad podcast. We've been doing our podcast for nearly 5 years. We have over 265 episodes now. We release 2 new episodes per week at this time. And we're talking about a lot of these types of topics. And again, I'm a normal guy. I live in a normal house. I drive normal cars. I've had a lot of normal life challenges, a lot of scary life challenges too. And we've navigated a lot of those things being debt free. And we here on this show just share a lot of what we're doing and how we're doing it differently compared to a lot of other people there. Even in today, again, with economic times, with inflation the way it is, it's such a great podcast to see what you can do this different. It is available to you. Also, we do have other free workshops on our website if you go to debtfreedad.com. And then we also have our support and accountability system called Roots of Personal Finance, which is where we work with our members more in a group format, even in some cases one-on-one, and giving them really, in my opinion, the most important part of really any goal you want to achieve, which is accountability and support. We're really good at learning the things that we need to do. I am too. What we're really bad at is at consistent effort. That's what we're bad at, right? So what we've built with Roots is really giving people that ongoing accountability to do, like you said, Natalie, this hard work on a regular basis. So you can free yourself from financial stress and finally be able to live that life that you want to live. Yeah,
you can't be under a rock and do these things, that accountability partner, and finding community in anything we're trying to achieve, whether health, wellness, faith, all of these things. When we have that community, it's so much easier. We can support each other. Brad, thank you so much. Great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great information. We'll have to do it again
thanks so
soon.
much.
You bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. And again, I get it's a tough topic for everybody, but and I think what we try to get through on our show is you don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed. Most of the people that I talk to, we all have a similar story when it comes to our financial challenges. And there's so many of us out there that are struggling with this. It's okay to reach out and get some help. Yeah, that's the most important thing, is just to reach out, get the help, and start something. That's great. Yeah. All right. Well, take care. I appreciate you. Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.